everything is going to hell down here in Texas.
Oh, that's right, people. What is up? Welcome back to the show. This is episode 237 of the Loon Gummin Podcast, and I'm your host, Big Bad Bob, otherwise known as Rob Clark, here with you for another exciting show. We are going to be talking about attorney Carol Jarnagin here in the show today, and what he said, and what people thought about what he said. And we're also going to be taking a closer look at some of the criminal investigative practices that were standards and in place in 1963, and see how well the Dallas police lived up to them. A lot of people are not aware of, exactly what the standards and practices were involving criminal investigation. All the way back in 1963. What were the protocols? What was expected of them? How was evidence to be collected? How was it to be handled? Was there a chain of custody? All these things and all these questions will be answered, I promise you. Before we get into the show, let's hear a word from our sponsors. Big Bad Bob here with you for Silk City Hot Sauces. Why Silk City? Because this hot sauce comes to you directly from Paterson, New Jersey, also known as Silk City. These hot sauces are 100% natural, gluten-free, vegan, contain no chemicals, fillers, dyes, or junk. Everything is packed into recyclable glass containers because glass doesn't leach weird flavors into the product. All other hot sauces are sourced in small batches from locally bought fresh peppers. It's all about the pepper, people. I'm telling you. Your boy, Big Bad Bob, loves his food like he loves his women. Hot and spicy, but not so hot you can't eat them. So, if you love yourself some sauce and you're tired of trying to transform your bland meat into something edible, with the tip of a jar, you will transform your life forever. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com, place an order, and upon checkout, enter the code GUNMAN, that's GUNMAN, for 20% off of your entire order. You won't regret it. Thank me later. Peace. That's right, folks. You can support the show and get some great tasting hot sauce that is actually palatable and edible. Head over to silkcityhotsauce.com, place an order, and then check out, put in the code GUNMAN, that's GUNMAN, for 20% off your entire order. It's a great deal. It's some good sauce, and it helps to support the show. All right, so let's get right into this here. So, I peruse all kinds of shit all the time, from different directions, up, down, sideways, backwards, diagonally. Always looking into things and rereading things and going back, because doing this for so long, you tend to forget. A lot of things, but you tend to forget a lot of things, or you misremember things. So it's always good to go back to the source. So this whole Carol Jarnagin adventure started way back, way back. And I'm talking, pretty much right after the assassination it started. And we'll get into that story. This comes from Forgive My Grief, Penn Jones. And they're talking about Carol Jarnagin and his journey talking to and investigating Carol Jarnagin. Now, the Dallas police and the Warren Commission talked to Carol Jarnagin as well. But let's get Penn Jones's version first, because he's always a character. So he says, of the many amazing things in the Warren Commission exhibits is the statement of Carol Jarnagin, and it's one of the most astounding. Attorney Jarnagin, we felt, either has total recall memory, or he had a tape recorder with him that night, or he made up the story out of his imagination. Our contention is that the commission should have heard Jarnagin, so the members could come to their own conclusions rather than depend solely on the opinions of District Attorney Henry Wade. On January the 13th, 1966, we asked Jarnagin if he had a tape recorder that night in the Carousel Club, and he said he did not. And we said, well, then you sure must have a fantastic memory. Jarnagin said he graduated in the upper 20% of his class at Southern Methodist University. He had no trouble getting into the University of Chicago after that. He told us he once made 100 on a college chemistry examination with many chemical formulas as answers. He said, I made 100 on that test, and I think I could recite the chemical formula to you right now. Jarnagin is an excellent chess player, which is a game requiring skill and a good memory. Jarnagin repeated that he told the truth in his statement, and he holds no ill will towards anyone. When asked if he is friendly with Henry Wade, members of the same legal fraternity, Jarnagin said, well, yes, Wade did the only thing he could under the circumstances. But Jarnagin did not elaborate. Several points would seem to make reasonable men scream for a thorough investigation of the Jarnagin statement. For example, at the time of the assassination, Ruby was sitting in the Dallas News building in a room from which he could have watched Oswald get off his shots and thus earn his pay, discussed below. Oswald, after the shooting, was walking in the direction of Ruby's apartment, where one might presume Oswald expected to pick up his pay. Apparently, Oswald changed directions to the Texas Theater after the killing of Tippit. We have been told Oswald once worked part-time at the theater. Never heard that before, but okay. Most students of this case are convinced that if Oswald shot, his bullets hit only Governor Connolly. To the real students of this case, the evidence is compelling that President Kennedy was shot only twice and by a second rifleman from the front. Excuse me. Does it not seem that this evidence, plus the actions of Ruby and Oswald, added to the voluntary statement of Jarnagin, amount to enough evidence for Jarnagin to be called before the commission as a witness? Below are parts of the Jarnagin statement, which he mailed to the FBI on December the 4th, 1963. And now, Jarnagin's statement did make it into the Warren Commission exhibits, but he was not called to testify before the Warren Commission. So we have this. On December the 5th, 1963, the Bureau supplied the following copy of a letter and an 8-page statement received at the Bureau on December 5th from Mr. Carol Jarnagin, attorney at law, 511 North Acred, Building, Room 428, Dallas, Texas. Mr. J. Edgar Hoover, Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Washington, D.C. Dear Mr. Hoover, on October the 4th, 1963, I was in the Carousel Club in Dallas, and while there, I heard Jack Ruby talking to a man using the name H.L. Lee. These men were talking about plans to kill the governor of Texas. This information was passed on to the Texas Department of Public Safety on October the 5th, which is the next day, by telephone. On Sunday, November 24th, 63, I definitely realized that the picture in the November 23rd, 1963 Dallas Times-Herald of Lee Harvey Oswald was a picture of the man using the name H.L. Lee, whose conversation with Jack Ruby I overheard back on October the 4th, 1963. I thereafter attempted to recall as much of this October 4th, 1963 conversation with as much accuracy as possible and reduced it to writing. The enclosed original and 2 copies of this report are true to the best of my own personal knowledge and belief, and this report is sent to you for whatever use it may be in assisting the FBI in your current investigation. If and when you see fit, I have no objection to the copies of this report being sent by you to the DA of Dallas County and to the Attorney General of Texas and to any other officials to whom you may see fit to disclose this information. My only request is that my identity remain undisclosed as long as possible. Respectfully submitted, yours very sincerely, Carol Jarnagin. All right, so he's asking for anonymity. Liberty lobby. Yes, there's another one. Anonymity. Okay. So, quote, report of events which took place in the Carousel Club at 1312 and a half Commerce Street, Dallas, Texas, on Friday, October 4th, at about 10 p.m. until almost 11:45 p.m. The club is located on the second floor and is entered by a stairway leading up from the sidewalk on the south side of Commerce Street. Witness, who is an attorney and a client, who is an exotic dancer, walk up the stairs to the Carousel Club at about 10 p.m. The dancer, stage name Robin Hood, desires to talk with Jack Ruby, the owner of the club, about securing a booking for employment. The witness and the dancer enter the club and sit down at the second table on the right from the entrance. The dancer faces the stage, which is against the east wall, and to the left, north of the passageway which leads east from the second floor entrance door. I'm already confused. And the witness sits facing the entrance doorway. The ticket booth is at the south end of the building, or landing at the top of the stairs, and the entrance doorway of the second floor. All right, fuck all that. Several minutes after the witness and the dancer are seated, the witness notices a man appear in the lighted entrance area and tell the girl in the ticket booth want to see Jack Ruby. In a short period of time, the bouncer appears and with a flashlight shines a beam of light upon the ceiling on the inside of the club at the entrance area. The man who has asked to see Jack Ruby is dressed in a tan jacket, has brown hair, needs a haircut, is wearing a sport shirt, is about 5'10" in height, 5'9" or 5'10". His general appearance is somewhat unkempt, and he does not appear to be dressed for night clubbing. He, the new arrival, sits with his back to the wall at the first table to his right from the entrance area. After a few minutes, he orders and is served a bottle of beer. He continues to sit alone and appears to be staring at the dancer. The dancer leaves the table, and the new arrival stares intently at the witness. The witness notices the new arrival's eyes are dark, and his face is unsmiling. And after some minutes, a man dressed in a dark suit, about 45 years of age, partially bald, medium height and medium to heavy build, dark hair, and more or less hawk-faced in appearance from the side, joins the new arrival at the table. The new arrival appeared to be about 25 years of age. The older man, dressed in a dark suit, was later indicated by the dancer to be Jack Ruby, and the following conversation was overheard. And here we have the infamous conversation between, allegedly, Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald. Jack Ruby starts it off. Parentheses, some name not clearly heard or not definitely recalled by this witness. What are you doing here? The man who had been sitting alone says, don't call me by my name. Ruby, what name are you using? I'm using the name H.L. Lee. Ruby, what do you want? I need some money. Money? I just got in from New Orleans. I need a place to stay and a job. Ruby, I noticed you hadn't been around in 2 or 3 weeks. What were you doing in New Orleans? There was a street fight, and I got put in jail. Ruby, what charge? Disturbing the peace. Ruby, how'd you get back? I hitchhiked. I just got in. Ruby, don't you have a family? Can't you stay with them? They're in Irving. They know nothing about this. I want to get a place to myself. They don't know I'm back. Ruby, you'll get the money after the job is done. Lee, what about half now and half after the job is done? Ruby, no. But don't worry, I'll have the money for you after the job is done. Lee, how much? Ruby, we've already agreed on that. Ruby leans forward and some of the conversation following is not heard by the witness. Nextly, Ruby, how do I know that you can do the job? It's simple. I'm a Marine sharpshooter. Ruby, are you sure that you can do the job without hitting anybody but the governor? Lee, I'm sure. I've got the equipment ready. Ruby, have you tested it? Will you need to practice any? Lee, don't you worry about that. I don't need any practice. When will the governor be here? Ruby, oh, he'll be here plenty of times during campaigns. Lee, where can I do the job? And Ruby, from the roof of some building. Lee says, no, that's too risky. Too many people around. Ruby, but they'll be watching the parade. They won't even notice you. Lee, but afterwards they would tear me to pieces before I could get away. Ruby, well, shit, then do it from here, indicating the north end of the Carousel Club, right there out of the window. Lee, how would I get in? Ruby, well, I'll tell the porter to let you in. Lee, but won't there be people in the place? Ruby, I can close the place for the parade and leave word with the porter to let you in. Lee, but what about the porter? Ruby, I can tell him to leave after letting you in. He won't know anything. Lee, I don't want any witnesses around when I do the job. Ruby, you will be alone, I assure you. Lee, how do I get away? There won't be much time afterwards. Ruby, you can just run out the back door here. Lee, what about the rifle? What do I do if the police run in while I'm running out? Ruby, I hide the rifle. You just heard the shot and ran in from the parade to see what was going on. And in the confusion, you can walk out the front door and into the crowd. Lee, no, they might shoot me first. There must be time for me to get out the back way before the police come in. Can you lock the front door after I come in and leave the back door open? Ruby, that would get me involved. Although, shooting from your bar is not going to get you involved, Ruby. Okay. How could I explain you in my club with a rifle and the front door locked? Well, you could say that Lee locked the door after he came in it. Lee, well, you could just say you left the front door open and it was locked from the inside when somebody slipped in while you were outside watching the parade. Lee says again, but what about the money? When do I get the money? Ruby, I have it here for you. Lee, but when? I'm not going to have much time after the shooting to get away. Ruby, I'll have the money on me and I'll run in first and hand it to you, and you can run on out the back way. I mean, this sounds like a Three Stooges plan if I've ever heard one, folks. Um, so he says, Lee, I can't wait long. Why can't you leave the money in here? Ruby, how do I know you'll do the job? Lee, how do I know you'll show up with the money after the job's done? Ruby, you can trust me, my boy. Besides, you'll have to persuade her. Lee, the rifle. I want to get away from it as soon as it's used. Ruby, you can. Trust me. Lee, what about giving me half the money now and half the money after the job's done? Ruby, I can't turn loose of the money until the job is done. If there's a slip up and you don't get him, they'll pick the money up immediately. I couldn't tell them that I gave it half of it to you in advance. They'd think I double crossed them. I would have to return all the money. People think I have a lot of money, but I couldn't raise half of that amount even by selling everything I have. You'll just have to trust me to hand you the money as soon as the job is done. There's no other way. Remember, they want the job done just as bad as you want the money. And after this is done, they may want to use you again. Lee, not that it makes any difference, but what have you got against the governor? Ruby, he won't work with us on paroles. With a few of With a few of the right boys out, we could really open up this state. And with a little cooperation from the governor, the boys in Chicago have no place to go, no place to really operate. They've clamped down the lid in Chicago. Cuba's closed. Everything's dead. Look at this place, half empty. If we can open up this state, we can pack this place every night. Those boys will spend if they have the money. And remember, we're right next to Mexico. There'd be money for everybody if we can open up this state. Lee says, how do you know the governor won't work with you? Ruby, it's no use. He's been in Washington too long. They're too straight up there. After they've been there a while, they get to thinking like the attorney general. The attorney general. Now, there's a guy the boys would like to get, but it's no use. He stays in Washington too much. Lee, a rifle shoots as far in Washington as it does in Texas, doesn't it? Ruby, forget it. That would bring the heat on everywhere, and the feds would get into everything. No, forget about the attorney general. Lee, killing the governor of Texas will put the heat on you too, won't it? Ruby, not really. They'll think some crackpot or communist did it, and it'll be written off as an unsolved crime. Lee, that is, if I get away. Ruby, oh, you'll get away. All you have to do is run out the back door. Lee, well, what kind of door is there back there? It won't accidentally lock on me, will it? Ruby, no, you can get out that way without any trouble. Lee, it doesn't open onto a fire escape, does it? I don't want to run out onto an open fire escape with a rifle in my hand right after the shooting. Ruby, no, no, it's a safe way out. I'll show you, but not right now. Lee, there's really only one building to do it from, one that covers Main, Elm, and Commerce. Ruby, which one is that? The school book building, close to the triple underpass. Ruby, what's wrong with doing it from here? Lee, well, what if he goes down another street? And then that's where it ends. And Penn Jones says, this is all the statement we feel necessary to print. We insist only that the author of this statement should have been called before the commission as a witness. He says, next we will show the preferential treatment given to the Attorney General of Texas, Wagner Carr. So that's basically the crux of Penn Jones's interaction or his thoughts on Carol Jarnagin. Penn Jones wrote this in 1966. So, they've had approximately 2 years because, if Jarnagin went to the FBI in December of 63, you're almost in 64 then. So we're looking at 2 years in between this. And it does seem a little odd that, Carol Jarnagin could remember this detailed conversation in such clear form down to, nuances and directions and all this jazz, right? It just seems like, honestly, it seems made up, The question is, why? Why would a random lawyer in Dallas make up a story like this? I mean, I could see somebody in any other profession, but a lawyer? A lawyer. A lawyer. So if Jarnagin wrote to the FBI on December the 5th, you're looking, this is approximately 2 weeks after the assassination. Okay? 2 weeks after. And he's giving the FBI all this information. Now, this correspondence and this FBI report make it into the Warren Commission, but like I said, he was not called before the Warren Commission to testify. Because hello, if it's true, then they've got a big problem on their hands that they definitely don't want to deal with. So, how do you go about discrediting this man? Well, I'll tell you, folks. So, let's see. On March the 2nd, 1964, in a letter or report to Jesse Curry, the chief of police, subject being the polygraph examination given to Mr. Carroll Jarnagin. Okay. And it says, Sir, at the request of Lieutenant Jack Revel, a polygraph examination was given to Mr. Carol Jarnagin of 5016 Northway Drive on this date. This examination was given to determine if Mr. Jarnagin had told the truth in an affidavit given to Mr. Henry Wade regarding a conversation Mr. Jarnagin states he overheard between Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby inside the Carousel Club on October the 4th, 1963. The following is a list of pertinent questions asked and the answers given. And boy, folks, are you going to love this. Number one, from here on, do you intend to answer my questions with the truth? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. Number two, have you told the complete truth in this affidavit? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. Number three, did you actually overhear this conversation between Jack Ruby and Lee Harvey Oswald? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. Number four, what were you drinking that night? Or were you drinking that night? Sorry. Answer, yes. Indication, truth. Number five, did you actually see Lee Harvey Oswald and Jack Ruby at that table on the night of October the 4th, 1963? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. Number six, did you hear this conversation between these two men on that night? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. Number seven, let's see. Did you hear the name H.L. Lee in this conversation? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. Number eight, is there any part of this affidavit that you know to be false? Answer, no. Indication, lying. So that's the slight first part. All right, let's get into the second part. Number nine, did you deliberately make up this affidavit to get some publicity? Answer, no. Indication, lying. Were you drunk that night? Answer, yes. Indication, true. 11, did you hear everything that you put in this affidavit? Answer, yes. Indication, lying. After the examination, it is the opinion of the examiner that Mr. Jarnagin did not overhear this conversation and that he made the story up. Respectfully submitted, Paul Bentley, polygraph examiner of the ID Bureau. Again, March 2nd, 1964. Now, what's a little deceptive about this summary report to Jesse Curry from Paul Bentley is that it does not include the charts that back up the assertions given in this, nor does it give all of the questions and answers put to Jarnagin. It is very selective in the ones that it puts forward. Obviously, Jarnagin was somewhere drinking and he got drunk that night. But everything else they're saying is a total lie. So did they even pinpoint that he was at the Carousel Club that night or somewhere else? That question wasn't asked. or maybe it was, but it wasn't included in the summary report. So, like I said, we don't have a full picture here. This is what we call a discreditation, folks. Um, to basically put a pin in Mr. Jarnagin and be done with him. Because if true, his assertion, if true, would change the entire complexion of the Oswald case if he could create a substantive link between Ruby and Oswald. Now, as you can see, like I said before, from Penn Jones's observation, that the level of detail in this conversation that Jarnagin remembers from, so long ago, almost verbatim, is an uncanny ability. We almost call that a photodac or like a photographic memory, or I forget what the word is for these people, not autodax, but something like that. But um, you know, it's almost easy to say that he's making this up at this point, because nobody can really understand how somebody could remember all of this in such detail. um, after some months of something that seemed insignificant at the time. So, fast forward a little bit, and we're going to take a look at somebody else, another researcher who made their way to Dallas and managed to catch up with Carol Jarnagin on the advice of Penn Jones. And that man's name was Barry Ernest, author of The Girl on the Stairs. And this is from his book, The Girl on the Stairs. He says, as an attorney, I expected to find a typically busy legal practice, but when I opened the door, I walked into an 8 foot by 8 room. My bathroom might be bigger than that. Maybe. A few feet ahead was a single chair for a visitor. To my left, a startled man rose from a small desk so quickly that his chair slammed into the wall behind him. Jarnagin was working out of a literal broom closet. Jarnagin was a frail person, thin, average in height. He wore glasses and a business suit, and probably in his early 40s. He smiled as I entered. He offered me his hand, no doubt expecting me to be another, maybe his only client of the day. As he sat back down, I told him the nature of my visit and would he mind answering a few questions. The smile left his face more quickly than it would have taken to traverse his meager office. He motioned for me to sit down as he reached for a cigarette. I settled into his only other chair, and minutes of silence drifted by. I don't want to talk about it, he finally said. I told him I only wanted to know what it was that made him so sure that the man he saw was Lee Harvey Oswald. He refused to answer. Instead, he nervously puffed on one cigarette, and then another, and another. This guy was making me uneasy. After 10 minutes of this shit, I got up to leave. Jarnagin motioned for me to sit again. He apologized for his silence, saying he had already provided the FBI with a full statement. That agency had disbelieved him, he said, labeling it a case of misidentification. And that's the way I'm going to accept it, he said. He stared at me in a way that made me self-aware. Then he averted his eyes as if it was me giving him the creeps. Hoping to break the ice, I said it was Penn Jones who had mentioned his name, and he immediately asked how many deaths had occurred to witnesses up to that point. I told him Jones had the number pegged at 45. Well, I don't want to be number 46, he muttered. And that's when it hit me. Jarnagin wasn't toying with me. He wasn't playing word games. He was scared for his life. Well, if I make you uncomfortable, I said, and he did nothing to stop me from leaving this time. Jones told me there were people in Dallas who were afraid to talk, and I had just met one of them. And that is a very earnest visit to Carol Jarnagin in Dallas, but it would not be his last visit, right? Let's see here. All right. So he goes back to visit Carol Jarnagin. He knocks on the door. When I did, Carol Jarnagin glanced up from his desk with a smile. His pleasantness left when he recognized who was knocking. Remember me? I said. He reached into his desk drawer and removed a pack of cigarettes, which he quickly opened and began to ignite. I certainly brought out a most unhealthy reaction in this guy. He waved his free hand toward the chair, indicating I should sit. Jarnagin had done nothing to redecorate the place. It smelled and looked the same as it had when I was here at least 5 months ago. So, okay, 5 months have passed in between meeting Jarnagin since the last time. He says, I remember you, he said. He proceeded to tell me my name, where I was from, the exact date and time of our previous meeting. He brought forth details of my past I had not remembered telling him during the idle chatter I apparently had lapsed into while we had talked last March. Then he gave me a verbatim recitation of the questions I had asked him back then and the answers he had provided, all without the benefit of notes. The man had a total recall. So, I began, can I get you to talk a bit about seeing Oswald at the Carousel Club? Jarnagin returned to his shill, puffing profusely on what seemed like an endless supply of cancer sticks. How many deaths now? He blurted out. What? How many deaths of witnesses does Jones show now? I don't really know. I haven't been in touch with him yet. He said, I'm sure it's higher than the 45 you mentioned the last time you were here. I had forgotten the number. As usual, Jarnagin refused to answer my questions. He even declined my idea of simply nodding yes or no in lieu of a verbal response. After 15 minutes of this nonsense, I got up to leave. Jarnagin raised his index finger and coughed out a plea. Wait, please sit down, he gasped. He studied me a bit longer and then broke his silence. It was Oswald I saw that night at the club. I asked how he could be so sure. Was his eyesight as sharp as his memory? He said he was able to see the man distinctly, since Oswald occupied the booth next to where Jarnagin was sitting, and based on the tantalizing conversation being overheard, the attorney had begun to pay close attention. That was on October the 4th, 1963. When Oswald's picture appeared on television and in papers 6 weeks later, he said he immediately associated with and being the same man that he'd seen with Ruby. Were there any other witnesses to what was being said? I asked. I was accompanied by a young woman. Her name was Shirley Malden, but she denies it now. Jarnagin said much of the eavesdrop conversation centered on a plot by Chicago gangsters to eliminate Kennedy. The plot was successful, he felt, because of Ruby's connections to organized crime. You're not writing a book, am I right? He asked. No, I said, I'm here strictly for my own curiosity. Good, he said, because I'm afraid that if I talk publicly about it, they'll get me too. Jarnagin was concerned for his life because of a previous incident. During Jack Ruby's trial in early 1964, Jarnagin said he was awakened in the middle of the night by a car idling just outside his bedroom window. As he drew the curtains back to investigate, he noticed a hose attached to the exhaust pipe of the vehicle. The hose snaked its way over to the air conditioning unit that he had running in his window. Carbon monoxide gas was filling his room. Whoever had set up the contraption must have discovered that he was awake, Jarnagin said, because seconds later the car sped away, dragging the hose behind it. The next morning, Jarnagin found an empty can of ether sitting outside the window. He discovered it, too, had been poured into his fan. He had not been awakened. And had he not been awakened, he would have been overcome by the combined fumes and surely died. Fortunately, the only consequence was a 3-day headache. Did he associate the attempt on his life with what he had seen at the Carousel Club? Most definitely, he replied. I have absolutely no other reason for why it occurred. And you never told any of this to the Warren Commission. They never contacted me, Jarnagin answered. I notified the FBI right after the assassination about what I'd seen and heard at Ruby's Club, but I guess they weren't interested either. Other than Penn Jones, you're the only person that I've really talked to. On December the 5th, 1963, Jarnagin sent the FBI an 8-page statement of his encounter. It ended up in the 26 volumes. Even though the commission refused to question Jarnagin, it was still interested in what he had to say. On June the 8th, 64, the commission asked Dallas District Attorney Henry Wade if he remembered the name of an attorney he had previously met who claimed to have seen Oswald and Ruby. Wade, I can't think of his name. Some of you all may know it, but he is a lawyer there in Dallas. Rankin, is the lawyer that you referred to, Carol Jarnagin. Wade, Carol Jarnagin, who is his name? Yes, sir. Wade said he met Jarnagin while prosecuting Ruby for Oswald's murder. He described him as one of some 8 to 10 witnesses who came forward with information about a possible connection between the two. According to Wade, Jarnagin had approached him with an offer to serve as a witness during the trial. Wade, he told me this is what happened, and I said, I can't put you on the stand without I am satisfied you are telling the truth because we have got a good case here. And if they prove we are putting a lying witness on the stand, it might hurt us. The only thing I know to do, I won't put you on the stand, but to take a polygraph to see if you're telling the truth or not. He said, I'd be glad to. This was during the trial, actually. And when the man called me, he took a lie detector. There was no truth in it, but he was in the place. He was in the place in Ruby's carousel, but that none of this conversation took place. Rankin, he found that was not anything you could rely on. Wade, I didn't use him as a witness, and after giving him the polygraph, I was satisfied that he was imagining it. I think he was sincere. I don't think he was trying to be a hero or anything. I think he really thought about it so much. I think he thought that it happened. But the polygraph indicated otherwise. I asked Jarnagin why he chose to talk to the DA if he feared for his life. I thought I could help, Jarnagin replied, and the attempt on my life did not occur until after I had offered my information to Henry Wade. In the polygraph test, Wade told the commission it showed you were not telling the truth. Jarnagin just shrugged. What can I say? The polygraph is notoriously unreliable, and I was very nervous. I was aware of how the government was describing the relationship between Ruby and Oswald, and I knew different. Suddenly, Jarnagin went mute, perhaps sensing he had said enough for too long. I decided to leave after one final question. How do you know, in all honesty and with such sincerity, without any doubt at all, that the man you saw talking with Jack Ruby that night was Lee Oswald? Could you possibly have been mistaken? The attorney took a long, final puff on his cigarette and then slowly snuffed it out in the ashtray. He leaned back in his chair, clasped his hands behind his head, and without expression, looked me squarely in the eyes for what seemed like several minutes. It was Oswald. I know it was him. So that is the very earnest Carol Jarnagin encounter. What do you guys think? What do you believe? And I know I've talked about this encounter in the past on this show in the context of this possibly being a not a Ruby Oswald, it's a Ruby Crayford conversation. You know, I don't know. It all seems a bit odd. to me that a lawyer would just make all this stuff up out of the blue. For what reason? I have no idea. And it's also very interesting that on his second trip to visit Jarnagin, he was astounded at Jarnagin's photographic memory of details of their conversation and of their conversation specifically that he didn't even remember telling him. So was Jarnagin telling the truth? Who knows? It's interesting to think about, folks. All right. Next up, let's talk about police protocols and whether or not the Dallas PD followed them or not in investigating this case. I managed to find a 50-page report all about the Dallas police collection of evidence, handling of evidence, witnesses, whether or not it matched the state protocols, the federal protocols in place at the time in 1963. Of course, we're not going to go through the entire 50-page report, but it is interesting if you can find it out there. It starts off kind of like this, and we'll just hit the highlights. I'm not going to read the whole thing to you because, like I said, it is 50 pages long, and I'm afraid my voice will die 10 pages in. It starts off, if the goal of the Dallas Police Department was to provide a quality, comprehensive, and impartial investigation of the Texas School Book Depository in order to provide irrefutable evidence in the murder of President Kennedy, then they failed. The basic processes for preserving, photographing, and collecting physical evidence used at the Texas School Book Depository were flawed. Dallas Police Department used inferior techniques to develop latent fingerprint evidence, neglected to document, protect, and collect all potential evidence in a timely manner, and may have inadvertently disregarded any evidence that could have identified an accomplice or exonerated Oswald altogether. However, why would they do that with the world watching? Perhaps confirmation bias drove an investigation that was below nationally acceptable standards. Perhaps stress precipitated the cognitive phenomena of unconscious implicit habits. There are people who believe the Dallas Police Department did an exemplary job working the crime scenes of the Texas School Book Depository and others. Those supporters stress the crime scene investigative standards of today should not be used to judge work completed in 1963. However, Dallas Police is accountable for complying with the well-published and generally accepted standards of 1963 and to the self-proclaimed procedures of their own department. Dallas Police is resolutely established to be severely deficient, discounting forever the myth that they followed protocol in processing the school book depository and the shooting death of President Kennedy. So, there's the setup. And let's see if we can find here the list of acceptable 1963 practices. Here we go. These are the National Investigative Standards of 1963. It starts out, the television series CSI, Crime Scene Investigation, and other similar programs portray the modern crime scene investigators as highly trained, knowledge-educated technicians who have received extensive specialized training in all disciplines of crime scene investigation and evidence collection. In the 1960s, crime scene investigators rarely had special training in the collection of physical or trace evidence. They relied on the tag it and bag it method. The emphasis was placed on detectives catching the perpetrator using their people skills, putting little or no emphasis on crime scene investigations. For many agencies, the physical evidence was only a minor part of the investigation used to confirm what detectives had already determined. Although there was no certifications to ensure proficiency and no specific experience or training requirements at the time of the assassination, There were generally accepted national standards for processing a crime scene. Paul L. Kirk, in Crime Investigation from 1953, documented the criteria for these standards. And here they go. Number 1, secure the scene to protect potential evidence and prevent witnesses from leaving the scene and apprehend suspects. All right, let's take this one by one here. How do you think the Dallas police did with securing the scene, protecting potential evidence, and preventing witnesses from leaving the scene and apprehending suspects? Well, I can tell you they didn't apprehend a suspect in the school book. If you believe the second room lunchroom encounter, they had one and let him go, allegedly. I don't think they did a very good securing the building, being as how employees were running in and out, reporters running in and out to use the phone, people going in and out through the front doors, the back doors, for quite some time, probably up to 15 or 20 minutes after the assassination. The scene was not secured very well. And at some point, Oswald left the building, so. Number 2, perform an organized and thorough search. Now, this wasn't done. We have, the accounts of Marion Baker and Cooley running up these stairs to the 5th floor, where they got in an elevator, went to the 7th floor, and came back down floor by floor by floor. Baker did not wait for backup. He didn't call for backup. He immediately charged into the building, Han Solo, and tried to apprehend a suspect in the building. What he should have done is immediately called for backup, posted somebody at the front entrance of the building, and ran around to the back of the building and covered that exit, right? And notified on the radio for any police in the area to assist in securing the building. Don't let anybody in or out. Once every entrance and exit was covered on that building, only then should they have proceeded inside and done an exhaustive floor-by-floor search, starting at the lower levels and working their way up. They might have actually caught somebody had they done this quickly enough, instead of Marion Baker deciding to be Superman that day and rush haphazardly into the building on his own. But instead, we got a very different outcome. So we're 0 for 2 here, folks. Number 3, photograph all potential evidence in situ. Okay. Was this done? Kind of, but not really. I mean, where was we don't have pictures of the rifle bag in situ. We know that the shells were picked up and then thrown back down on the floor. We don't know whether they were photographed first or after they've been thrown back on the floor. Even pictures of the sniper's nest were taken after the boxes were moved out of the way to search the area. So that any picture you see of the sniper's nest and how the boxes are sitting on the floor and how they're resting on the windowsill and all that jazz, that is actually a reconstruction of what they thought it looked like when they first got up there. That was not any photographs taken of that area were not in situ. So how much of this evidence can we trust? They would have had a lot of problems going to court with this evidence and their collection of it with a good lawyer that would have just tore them apart. Tore them apart. Number 4, indicate on a sketch the location of all potential evidence. Maybe pieces and parts of it were done. Maybe. But again, we don't know whether they were done from memory or they were done right there on the spot. So, they're useless. Number 5, complete a detailed description of the location and condition of potential evidence. So there should be a report, an organized report of where the evidence was located on the floor. Now, we do have some reports from different folks. I think there's a couple of reports out there that mention different people that found the rifle, different people that were identifying things, maybe different people that found the shells, but not one definitive statement of evidence positioning. Number 6, develop and collect fingerprints. Okay. Was this done immediately and in situ? Or was this done after certain things were taken down to the station? It's hard to say. But again, does it matter one way or the other if we have a suspect who worked in the building? Surely his fingerprints are going to be on things. So at that point, does it really matter? Does it really matter? Well, it kind of matters when you're talking about things that don't belong in the building, like a rifle and shells. You have all these other people picking this shit up and handling it with no gloves on. Does that contaminate the evidence before you even try to fingerprint it? Sure. That was a very dumb move on their part. Very dumb move. Number 7, collect the evidence, which they did. We have pictures of it coming out the front door. Sure enough, we have Lieutenant Day carrying the rifle by the strap at the front door. We have somebody else carrying out this gigantic rifle bag on a stick or something. I don't know what was holding it up in there. But that's about it. Surely the shells could have fit in somebody's pocket. But how good of a job did the Dallas police do searching the school book depository? Well, obviously not a very good job, because you know what they didn't find? They didn't find Oswald's clipboard. It was found by an employee a couple of days after the assassination. Stuffed behind some boxes there on the 6th floor. It's apparently, hey, we're not doing any more work. What do you need your clipboard for? This would have been the clipboard that he put his orders on, that he went around and collected the books for. So how good of a job did the Dallas police do searching the building? It seemed to me, when you're looking at Aaliyah's film and you see pictures, there is way, way, way too many people in that building, on that floor, searching, collecting, and processing evidence. Way too many. Not to mention people up there that shouldn't be up there, such as school book employees, depository employees, newsmen, people with video cameras, people with movie cameras, people with still cameras. It don't work for the police department. I'm glad they were up there because we got to see some things, but they shouldn't have been allowed up there or in the building at all. Lieutenant Carl Day was the supervisor for the Dallas Police Department unit that investigated homicide crime scenes in a state leading the nation in recorded murders from 1960 through 63. The Dallas population was ranked 14th in the nation. Therefore, it's reasonable to believe a 15-year veteran of that unit would have had experience in investigating homicide scenes in a city ranked 14th in the nation. It's also reasonable to expect Day was exposed to multiple opportunities to training referencing national standards for investigating crime scenes. Published works describing in detail the generally recognized national standards for investigating crime scenes have been readily available since the early 50s. Media coverage of trials such as the Sam Shepard trial in 56 was extensive, detailed, and captured the attention of the nation. The Shepard trial focused exclusively on the crime scene investigation, and subsequent reporting familiarized the public with nationally accepted investigative standards. The investigative procedures presented in the Shepard trial were still in effect in 1963. The following is a look at those standards and the subsequent evidence that demonstrates Dallas Police Department either complied with or ignored by them. Dallas Police Department, and specifically Lieutenant Carl Day, as the supervisor, should have been familiar with the well-published and generally accepted crime scene investigation standards of 63. At a minimum, Day and other officers on the crime scene should have complied with the self-proclaimed procedures of their own department. The record unfortunately indicates that they did not. The first priority upon arrival at a crime scene is to ensure the safety of officers and the public by determining that the perpetrator is not present. Once officers are confident the perpetrator is not present, they are to obtain potential witnesses and others found at the location. Comprehensive questioning of witnesses may assist with identifying a perpetrator, providing a description of the perpetrator, and indicating items within the scene the perpetrator may have touched or taken. National protocols indicate the secondary responsibility of officers present is to protect the scene from contamination. This means restricting entry to unauthorized personnel by placing officers at strategic locations and all points of entry. Dallas police officers should have been posted immediately at each point of entry, permitting only those individuals with a specific purpose to enter the building. By the early 50s, nationally accepted standards of protecting the scene from contamination and securing potential witnesses and suspects were well established. Personnel with access to the scene were to utilize caution to prevent alteration of the scene, contamination of, or destruction of potential evidence. Investigators were to wear cotton gloves to prevent depositing their own fingerprints on items of evidence. Evidentiary items were not to be touched prior to their documentation by photography and placement in a sketch. Officers were not to discard items such as matches, cigarettes, disposable food containers, or trash within the crime scene. Officers were to be cognizant of small items of evidence that could be stepped on, or blood stains that could be smeared, transient evidence that may degrade or disappear quickly, such as smoke or odors, was to be immediately documented in written form. In essence, until all evidence was collected, the crime scene investigation complete, and the scene ready to be released, the scene was to be carefully preserved. So, folks, is there any mention by the Dallas police of the smell of gunpowder on the 6th floor that day? I mean, a rifle was shot allegedly 3 times from this building by this window. Did anybody say anything about the smell of smoke or the smell of gunpowder on the 6th floor? The answer is no. The answer is no. Did they comply with national standards? Some. There was some talking to witnesses. There was some gathering of descriptions and descriptions disseminated of the suspect. But at that point, they had no idea whether or not the suspect was in the building or not. They assumed he was not, because proper securing of the building did not occur until 20 minutes after the assassination. And by then, your crime scene is fucked. It's contaminated. Now, those that say, oh, no. The Dallas police did a great job that day. You know, Marion Baker's to be commended for rushing into the building to hopefully get at the perpetrator and prevent further harm to the public, blah, blah, blah. They sealed off the building relatively quickly, yada, yada, yada. Now, the shooting of the president happened at about 12:30 p.m. From 12:31 to 12:33 p.m., Dallas police officer Marion Baker entered the school book depository searching for an unknown shooter. At approximately 12:40 p.m., Dallas Police Inspector J. Herbert Sawyer ordered the building sealed. Okay, so this is within 10 minutes of the shooting. Herbert Sawyer orders the building sealed. So how good a job did it do sealing the building, folks? Well, I'll tell you, pretty shitty, because at 12:50 p.m., 10 minutes after the order to seal the building was given, Secret Service agent Forrest Sorrells entered an unsecured door at the rear of the school book depository building. Top-notch job, folks. The curious nature of news media is what makes them good at their job. Unfortunately, that curiosity, when allowed to run unchecked, can be destructive to potential evidence, unbeknownst to them, resulting in an investigation with distorted conclusions. The official record contains several examples of newsmen having access to the crime scene while the scene was still being processed for physical evidence. FBI Special Agents Vincent Drain and James Bookout interviewed Carl Day concerning persons other than police officers which were present on the 6th floor on the afternoon of the shooting, and their report stated thus. On Saturday, November 23rd, 63, many persons unknown to him had apparently been on the 6th floor of the school book depository building and had taken a lot of photographs. In view of the fact that he noticed many empty film pack cartons where the boxes were located, and the boxes had been rearranged apparently for the purpose of taking photographs. FBI Special Agent Drain interviewed crime scene investigator Robert Studebaker on September 9th concerning his activities on the 6th floor. Studebaker told the agents, there were literally dozens of news media representatives from radio and television stations, newspapers, and magazines on the 6th floor. There were no restrictions on newsmen and law enforcement officers from moving freely about the building. Any of these individuals may have possibly handled the 4 cardboard boxes that were sent to the FBI for examination. Studebaker also confirmed that on Saturday, November 23rd, newsmen were all over the building, particularly the 6th floor. The newsmen were generally looking for and examining anything that might have been related to the shooting of President Kennedy and the Governor Connolly. Day and Studebaker's statements to the FBI concerning the press having unrestricted and unsupervised access to the 6th floor was corroborated by the Warren Commission testimony of Ira Beers, the 1963 photographer for the Dallas Morning News. Regrettably, Beers wasn't asked who had allowed the unauthorized persons to enter a crime scene while I was still being searched. Griffin, can you give us an estimate of what time that would have been when you were up there taking the pictures on the 6th floor? Beers. This would strictly be a guess, an estimate, probably around 4 o'clock. It was quite late in the afternoon, probably later. Now, in your pictures that you took, were any of the objects that were allegedly found up there on the 6th floor photographs, such as the position of the rifle and the placement of the boxes and other materials in the window from which the assassin is believed to have shot? Beers. Yes, prior to admitting us to the building, I made pictures of a sack, a very long, narrow sack type of affair that was brought from down there, pop bottles and pieces of chicken. And I also made a picture of the rifle, which I believed was Lieutenant Carl Day from Dallas Police. Crime Lab brought that, and upon going in the building, I photographed the area where the rifle was found. I photographed the area around the window from which the assassin was supposedly seated. I moved into that area, made a picture from the window, supposedly the window from which the bullets were fired, that showed a little corner of boxes which possibly the rifle rested on. It shows the street down below where the automobile was traveling when the president was killed. Now, with such a high profile case, there must have been an inordinate amount of pressure on the Dallas Police Department to provide accurate and timely information to the public. Normally, limited information is released to the media until a full understanding of the event can be developed and evidence has been secured. Access to a crime scene via media should be denied to prevent contamination or alteration of the scene and interference with investigative procedures. So, there you have it, folks. And then we talk a little bit about evidence contamination. And Lieutenant Carl Day testified that after the rifle was discovered at approximately 1:22 p.m., it was photographed and he personally took it to the police department for digital processing. Day said he returned to the depository around 3 p.m. the same day and remained there till 6. No questions were asked of Day if the scene had been secured while he was gone or under whose supervision Studebaker was working. Day, I went back to the school book depository and stayed there. It was around 3 that I got back, and I was in the building until about 6, directing the other officers as to what we needed in way of photographs and some drawings and so forth. Beelan, what did you do when you got back? What photographs did you take? Day, we made the outside photographs of the streets. We made more photographs inside and did further checking for prints by using dust on the boxes around the window. So, this is all after you have, a ton of Dallas police, a ton of sheriff's deputies, Secret Service employees, all having been on the building after the shots. So it's just shoddy police work, folks. Shoddy. Let's talk a little bit about chain of custody, folks. Chain of custody is a legal term that refers to the ability to guarantee the identity and integrity of items collected as evidence on a crime scene. For purposes of litigation, it is necessary to have a written record that documents the possession, handling, and location of evidence from the moment it is collected until it is used in court. A well-maintained chain of custody, in addition to assuring contamination alteration has not taken place, the chain of custody establishes proof that the item selected at the crime scene is the same evidence that is presented in a court of law. Based on Day's testimony, it appears the chain of custody for the casings is questionable. The envelope was unsealed, and the names of persons possessing physical possession and a note of the corresponding time period were not documented. Apparently, from the time of collection at approximately until 10 p.m. that evening, it is unknown who possessed the casing. Beelan, had the shells been out of your possession then? Day, Mr. Sims had the shells from the time they were moved from the building, or he took them from me at that time, and the shells I did not see again until around 10 o'clock. Beelan, who gave them to you at 10 o'clock? Day, they were in this group of evidence being collected to turn over to the FBI. I don't know who brought them back. Beelan, was the envelope sealed? Day, no, sir. Beelan, had it been sealed when you gave it to Mr. Sims? Day, no, sir. Beelan, was the envelope ever sealed? Day, no, sir. No, sir, no. In direct conflict with Day's testimony, Dallas Police Crime Scene Detective Richard Sims testified he did not retain possession of the casings when they were collected. Sims, I picked them up from the floor, and he had an envelope there, and he held the envelope open. Ball, you didn't take them in your possession, did you? Sims, no, sir, I don't believe I did. You can't make this stuff up, folks. There's no clear, concise chain of custody for the possession of the shell casings. Plain and simple. And let's talk a little bit about souvenirs, folks. Some of the evidence collected by the Dallas Police Department during its investigation were kept as souvenirs by some members of the police department, as evidence in Gary Savage's book, JFK First Day Evidence. Savage describes how his uncle, Rusty Livingston, a detective assigned to the Dallas Crime Lab at the time of the assassination, admitted he kept 5 original photographs showing fingerprints located on the trigger housing of the rifle allegedly used by Lee Oswald. An original fingerprint card taken from Oswald in the morgue was also retained by Livingston. Savage claims Livingston kept 5 8x10 photographs that were never forwarded to the Warren Commission as a personal memento. This action was clearly a breach of the chain of custody for evidence in the criminal investigation of Kennedy's death. It is rumored that Dallas Police Sergeant Gerald Hill provided evidentiary photographs to author Judy Bonner for her book Investigation of a Homicide, The Murder of John F. Kennedy in 1969. Detective Studebaker, who took many of the crime scene photographs inside the depository, told the House Select Committee that he had made numerous copies of evidence photos for fellow officers. The HSCA received first-generation photographs and quotes, meaning that they were made directly from the original negatives from such individuals as the widow of Dallas police officer Roscoe White, the widow of George DeMorenshield, and Dallas detective Richard Stovall. Police are ethically obligated to observe the integrity of the investigation and their agency's reputation. It is important to prevent the appearance of impropriety and unbiased investigation on the part of those whose duty it was to conduct a fair investigation. The forwarding of such items related to assassination investigation may have not been illegal, but it certainly seems unethical. So yeah, there's a big problem when you have the famous backyard photograph, and you have Marina testifying to taking one photograph. And then another version of the photograph pops up. And another version of the photo pops up. And, all of this stuff should have been in evidence. It should have been forwarded to the Warren Commission, and it was not. So there's all kinds of things wrong with the way that the police, quote, investigated this assassination. A good lawyer could have ripped this case apart in court very easily. At least, insofar as much of the quote unquote official evidence. Good luck proving anything when your chain of custody is so screwed up, your protocols are so screwed up, you didn't follow the procedure standards for the time to do anything to your investigation. It was just a mess from top to bottom. So anybody that ever says Dallas Police did a great job, you can say, no, they did not. No, they did not. I mean, look at the circus that was in the Dallas Police headquarters. You saw how many news people were lining hallways when they're trying to walk Oswald around there. I mean, they're literally 2 inches away from Oswald, sticking recorders in his face and blasting off pictures. And it was a circus, a fiasco, a circus sideshow, all for the benefit of us, the world media, and not so much for the integrity of the investigation into Lee Harvey Oswald and the assassination. Anyway, that's it for me, folks. Follow along on Twitter and TikTok at the Lone Gunman 7, on Facebook, the Lone Gunman Facebook page, on YouTube. Search for the Lone Gunman Podcast channel. Like and subscribe and ring the bell to get notified. That's right. Thank you again, everyone, for listening and following along. This is your boy, the Triple B, Big Bad Bob. And he is...
Free world, still for all to see. back seat of his car. Blood was on his head. Mrs. Kennedy cried, "Oh no!" and
We don't believe all what they tell you. The FBI or the CIA. The media and the lies that tell you. The biggie bit that killed JFK. Yeah, they blew him away. 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 Away.